Next on Newsmax Prime.
I would not advise people who feel strongly or are concerned about some of the issues that have been raised during the course of the campaign. I wouldn't advise them to be silent. What I would advise, what I advised before the election and what I will continue to advise after the election, is that elections matter, voting matters, organizing matters, being informed on the issues matter.
President Obama abroad, stoking the fires of protest at home. Newsmax Prime starts right now. Good evening and welcome to Newsmax Prime. I'm J.D. Hayworth. Of prime interest tonight, President Obama endorses the politically aggrieved taking to the streets here as he takes his final official trip abroad as our nation's chief executive. The way I see it, this does not come as a surprise. You and I talked together 2 nights ago at this time about Mr. Obama's inclinations, how he began his working career as a community organizer, which of course is just a polite way to say street agitator. No, the president's response is predictable. What is somewhat surprising, at least to me, is the way the question was asked by one of the journalists on this final Obama European junket.
I'm wondering if you would advise some of those protesters at home to stop demonstrating against some of the charged rhetoric that has been used by Donald Trump.
I would not advise people who feel strongly or are concerned about some of the issues that have been raised during the course of the campaign. I wouldn't advise them to be silent.
Now, I know the press is overwhelmingly biased in favor of the left, but the spin of that reporter's question surprised even me. So, for the social justice proponent posing as a journalist, I say sarcastically, hey sister, this bulletin just in. The protesters did not take to the streets because they were disturbed by Donald Trump's rhetoric. They did so because they're upset at his election. As for the president, he could have turned lecturer and spoken of the fact that in elections, someone wins, someone loses, and if you lose, you redouble your efforts to prevail the next time at the ballot box. He could have spoken of the virtues of settling disputes with ballots instead of bullets. He could have even channeled Bill Clinton and said, I feel your pain. Instead, he chose to encourage unrest. Yet another example of why he will be remembered as our first agitator-in-chief. And that's the way I see it. Back here at home, as the media continues to paint an image of a tough transition for the Trump administration, Miranda Kahn shows us there is one major sign that it could be a much smoother ride.
President-elect Donald Trump has been promising for some time to help unify the country, and we've already seen that with several Republicans, but even some high-profile Democratic leaders seem to be eager to hop on board, at least when it comes to the issue of rebuilding America. Shortly after the president-elect and soon-to-be First Lady Melania Trump made their rounds throughout the White House, Democrats welcome newly elected Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
We're going to keep a really careful eye on the president.
While both Schumer and Trump are well known for speaking their minds, the two parties seem hopeful they can find some kind of common ground.
We're ready to stand shoulder to shoulder with Republicans, working with soon-to-be President Trump on issues where we agree.
One of the issues where the two may be able to bridge their divide: fixing America's infrastructure.
Our roads and bridges fell into disrepair, yet we found the money to resettle millions of refugees at taxpayer expense.
Right now, Trump plans to spend $550 billion over the next decade to upgrade America's crumbling infrastructure, something many economists, Republicans, and Democrats believe will create millions of new jobs.
Our entire infrastructure, it supports millions upon millions of jobs, good-paying jobs. We cannot fail to invest in infrastructure.
Now, while Trump's $1 trillion infrastructure proposal shows signs of promise, there's still that question of how it will be funded. According to The Hill, Trump has called for a combination of both bonds and tax credits. JD, back to you.
Thanks very much, Miranda. Makes me wonder what happened to that stimulus project of President Obama a few years back. At any rate, let's talk about it now with our two guests. First, from Washington, D.C. via Skype, Brad Blakeman, Republican strategist and former senior staff advisor to President George W. Bush. Brother Brad is now instructing some of those protesters, I guess, who are students at Georgetown University. Also with us tonight, international reporter Margaret Howell. Margaret and Brad, let's take a look at President Obama holding his joint press conference today in Germany with Angela Merkel. And again, Mr. Obama feels the urge to always talk domestic politics abroad. Here's what he had to say.
My hope is that the president-elect coming in takes a similarly constructive approach, finding areas where we can cooperate with Russia. I don't expect that the president-elect will follow exactly our blueprint or our approach, but my hope is that he does not simply take a realpolitik approach.
So here's the thing I have a problem with, Brad. You tell me if I'm wrong about this. I thought the protocol was when you're abroad, you don't politic domestically. In other words, you don't badmouth people of the other party when you're on official state visits. But I guess with Mr. Obama, that rule is never applied.
No, he can't help himself. It's always apology, appeasement, and lecture. And by the way, it's disgraceful for the president to go over there and speak the way he does about an incoming president. Would he have the same words if Hillary Clinton were the president? No. Before this trip was planned, he thought this was going to be a victory tour, and Hillary Clinton was a shoo-in. There's no reason for the president to be overseas now. He's the lamest of ducks. He has a failed foreign policy and a domestic policy that equals his foreign policy credentials. He should be here trying to smooth the way for a new president, but he can't help himself.
You know, Brad, as you're saying that, and Margaret, I had this mental image. President Obama intended to take a victory lap, but now he's like the guy working for the circus, figuratively sweeping up after the Republican elephant. Is that powerful imagery there or what?
Oh, it absolutely is. And how dare he, frankly. You know, he called Angela Merkel his greatest international ally. Well, we know what she did to Germany, frankly, and he was just in Greece yesterday. You know, the media didn't cover the fact that there were 2,500 people that took to the streets knocking over police barricades. Greece is starving at the moment. They've been a dumping ground for hundreds of thousands of unwanted refugees that wealthier Europe didn't want to take, and he's lecturing them on the ills of injustice. It's almost a comedy skit. He's absolutely the man sweeping up the peanuts behind the elephant, and he just needs to, you know, he needs to chalk it up and say this is his final vacation. We know that he's cost the U.S. taxpayer $3.2 million. By the time Trump is done with 2 terms, he will have cost us $8. And I think we're getting a heck of a bargain here. I wish he'd hurry up and go, frankly. It's highly disrespectful to our country, to our nation, to our people, and to our president-elect to be lecturing those abroad about the ills of injustice and how he hopes we'll have a better relationship with Russia. Well, of course we will. We've averted World War III, frankly. We have no military provocation with Russia. And we know that Putin and Trump have already connected, and they have a pledge together to work diplomatically to fight ISIS. So, you know, much, you know, to Obama's chagrin, unfortunately, sir, this all took place without you, and we all can't wait for you to leave already. I think we're 63 more days to go.
Well, yeah, I will channel Al Gore from years. It's time for him to go. But let's go on to another subject right now. Brad Blakeman, you and I are of a certain age, and we can recall the late, great 1968. And that close election between Dick Nixon and Hubert Humphrey. But then a period of time passes. What was it? Close to 6 weeks. And then on one night, Richard Nixon introduces his whole cabinet. Now we're hearing from the leftist press that Mr. Trump's transition is in chaos. These things take time, don't they?
You bet. Could you imagine what the press would say if on November 9th he rolled out his entire cabinet? They would have said, how presumptuous. Why was he working on the transition, even though the transition office had been open since August, on these types of matters when he should have been concentrating on winning? Well, he was concentrating on winning, and now he's concentrating on governing, and it's not going to be on their timetable. It's going to be on President-elect Trump's timetable. He's going to vet them. He's going to interview them. He's going to make sure they're in sync with policy and direction, and they're the right person for the right job. So everybody needs to take a chill and let the president-elect get the best and brightest to serve our country.
Meantime, his running mate, the vice president-elect, Mike Pence, my old congressional colleague, was back up on the Hill in our old stomping grounds. After meeting with the House Republican Conference, he spoke with reporters and he sounded a note of optimism. Let's look and listen.
Very humbling to be back among my former colleagues. We're excited about moving the Trump agenda forward in the coming Congress, and I'm just so grateful. So grateful for the warm hospitality and all of their determination to work with our incoming administration to make America great again.
So, Margaret, there is not only my former congressional colleague, but my contemporary in talk radio sounding the note to make America great again. I'm just kind of interested, since he's moved to the front of the transition team, you remember those organizational charts where you'd have a CEO, Chief Executive Officer, and a COO, Chief Operating Officer? To the extent it's possible constitutionally, does Mike Pence become, in essence, the Chief Operating Officer?
I think so. And frankly, I couldn't be happier with his choice of vice president. And I think a lot of us felt that way after the debate with Tim Kaine, where he emerged looking so presidential himself. I think that this is a wonderful thing. And we know that Trump is heavily reliant on advisors. He's his own man. You know, the motto of let Trump be Trump. I remember seeing that on the whiteboard when there was a tour going on in his office. But at the same time, he surrounds himself with very, very well vetted, very, people of insanely amazing character like Mike Pence. And I think that a lot of authority is left up to him to sort of fill and recommend people for the transition team or to transition into the administration. What we do know is that more than likely Laura Ingraham will most probably be his press secretary.
Well, let's wait and see, Margaret. She's cool. She's a pal, but we gotta wait on that. We'll see if that comes true. Hey, as I turn back into the reporter at this kind of intimate press conference with you two, final word to Brad Blakeman. Mr. Trump making good on the notion if you come to work for his administration, 5-year ban on lobbying. Effective reform, Brad? You got about 20 seconds.
Well, you know, I like lobbyists. And I think that the Founding Fathers thought so much of us that he put us in the Constitution with the right to petition your government. It's a necessary form of advocacy, and maybe that's a little bit harsh.
Well, 5 years, you don't get a chance to do something else, maybe come work in television or radio or something. Brad Blakeman, appreciate you tonight from Georgetown.
Thanks.
Margaret Howell, as always, good to talk to you. Up next, Willie Robertson of Duck Dynasty. Well, he's going fishing, or at least he's written a book about it. Stay with us.